Welcome on board of this course. I am really happy to see that you joined this course. MongoDB is an exciting technology, an exciting database solution, and even more than just a database solution, as you will learn throughout this course. And you can use it in basically any project you're building. If that's a website, a mobile app, a desktop app, or if you're working as a data scientist, you're probably working with some kind of data. You need to store data, you need to fetch data, and you need to do all of that fast and efficiently without worrying too much about database configuration, setup, and data structures. And MongoDB is an awesome solution for that. In this course, I'll thoroughly walk you through MongoDB and teach you everything you as a developer need to know. I'll teach you how to use MongoDB, how to structure your data there, how you can depict relations in a MongoDB world, how you can do configurations on your database, and most importantly, how you can perform efficient and powerful CRUD operations with MongoDB in a broad variety of ways. This is a very comprehensive course on MongoDB, and I'm super excited to dive into it with you. Now, who am I? My name is Maximilian Schwarzmüller. I'm a freelance web developer and 5-star rated instructor here on Udemy. I got a lot of courses, and I got courses as well as free YouTube videos on my channel, Academind, where I do already use MongoDB. But the complete course on it was missing. And since it's such an awesome technology and such an awesome database, it was about time to dive into it so that you can become a true MongoDB master. Now, this is a hands-on approach course. That means there will be slides, there will be theory, because you always need that, but most importantly, there will be a lot of working with MongoDB, where I work with MongoDB and you can work with MongoDB whilst following along in the videos. So that should be a lot of fun. Now, let's dive into the course and let's start with the most important question: what is MongoDB? So what is MongoDB? MongoDB is, most importantly, a database. It's a database, but the company behind MongoDB, which is focused on that database and a couple of our products, which I'll also talk about in this course. So the company behind that is also called MongoDB. But with MongoDB, I of course mean the database. Now, the name is stemming from the word humongous, because this database is built to store lots and lots of data, and not just from a data size perspective, but also in the sense of you can store lots of data and you can then work with it efficiently, which of course also is super important. So this is MongoDB. It's a database solution. Now, of course, we already got database solutions. We got MySQL, we got Postgres, we got thousands of database solutions already. So how is MongoDB different? Well, MongoDB, of course, also is most importantly a database server that allows you to then run different databases on it. So we might have a shop database running on our MongoDB server, because the MongoDB environment basically gives you a server which you start, on which you can then create multiple databases using MongoDB. So we have a shop database. In the MySQL world, we also have databases, and in such a database, we would have tables. In MongoDB, we have so-called collections. So in our shop, we might have a users and an orders collection. We probably would also have a products collection, but this is just an example, of course. So we have these collections inside our database, and you can have multiple databases and multiple collections per database. Now, inside of a collection, you have so-called documents, which look like this. Now, these documents, if you are having a JavaScript background, might look familiar to you. They look like JavaScript objects. And indeed, this is basically how you store data in MongoDB. You use this document format, this object format, as you know it from JavaScript. And you might even notice here that inside a collection, you are schemaless. This second document does not look like the first one. The age is missing. And this is a flexibility MongoDB gives you. It is really all about flexibility. Where SQL-based databases are very strict about the data you have to store in there, MongoDB is more flexible. You can store totally different data in one and the same collection, and therefore your database can grow with your application and your application needs. Of course, typically you will have some kind of structure in one collection because your app typically requires some type of structure to work with the data. And in this course, we'll actually have a whole module where I talk just about data structures and relations, and where I will make it clear how you can structure it, how you can follow best practices, how you want to structure different related data, and so on. But you are schemaless, and that is one important thing. Now, inside a document, as I mentioned, you use these JavaScript objects to store your data. To be precise, you use a format called JSON. And this is how a document would look like. In JSON, a single document is surrounded by these curly braces, and you will see that once we start working with it. And then we have our keys in there, so that would be a key. And a key consists of a name of that key here, which has to be surrounded in double quotation marks. So name, age, address, and hobbies would be key names here, or also keys. I will also refer to them as just keys. Then we have a colon, and then we have the value of that key. So here we have max, which would be some text, a string, and therefore also has to be enclosed in double quotation marks. But you can also store numbers without double quotation marks then. You could store booleans, true or false. And you can even store nested data, as you can see. The address key, or field as you could also call it, has an embedded document. So this again has curly braces in there and then another key value pair. And this is another cool feature of MongoDB and its documents. You can store nested data in there. And why is that helpful? Well, this allows you to create complex relations between data and store them in one and the same document, which makes working with it and fetching it super efficient. Where in SQL, you have to write complex joins to find data in table A and data in table B. Here, you can fetch it all in one document and you're good to go. So this is highly efficient and allows you to store data in a logical way. Hobbies shows you another example of data you can store in a document. Here we have a list of embedded documents, and you could also have a list of strings or numbers. So storing lists is also possible. And this all together is then one document inside a collection. Now in the title it also says BSON instead of JSON. Well, behind the scenes on the server, MongoDB converts your JSON data, which is this format you see here, to a binary version of it, which can basically be stored and queried more efficiently. You don't need to worry about that. We work with this JSON thing, we work with this object thing throughout the course. So this is the data we store, this is a document, and the whole theme of this video and of MongoDB really is the flexibility and the optimization for usability. And that is really what sets MongoDB apart from other database solutions and which makes it so awesome and so efficient from a performance perspective too. Because you can query data in the format you need it instead of running complex restructurings on the server. Now, you may or may not have a SQL background, but when I started working with MongoDB, there was one thing which I found kind of hard to wrap my head around. MongoDB is a so-called NoSQL solution, because it's basically following an opposite concept or philosophy than all the SQL-based databases do. Instead of normalizing data, which means storing it distributed across multiple tables where every table has a clear schema and then using a lot of relations, instead of doing that, MongoDB goes for storing data together in a document, and it also doesn't enforce a schema on you. So we got no schemas in MongoDB. If we have multiple documents in one and the same collection, they can have different structures. That is one thing I mentioned in the last video. And this is really important. This can, of course, lead to messy data, but it's still your responsibility as a developer to work with clean data and to implement a solution that works. But on the other hand, it gives you a lot of flexibility, and flexibility is always good. You can use MongoDB for apps that might still evolve, where the exact data requirements are just not set yet. You can get started and you can always add data with more information in a collection, in the same collection, at a later point of time. You also work with less relations. There are some relations, and I have a whole module where I talk about that, but with these embedded documents, which I already showed you, one core thing of MongoDB indeed is that you have less tables, so less collections, which you connect, but instead that you store data together. And this is where the efficiency is derived from. Since data is stored together, when your application is fetching data, it doesn't need to reach out to collection A, merge it with collection B, merge it with collection C. Instead, it goes to collection A. Then MongoDB has a very efficient querying mechanism behind the scenes so that it can go through all the data very fast when looking for a specific document. So this will be super fast. And then it finds that document and it's done. It doesn't need to do any merging most of the time. So this is really where the speed, the performance, and the flexibility comes from, and this hopefully speaks for itself that this can be useful when building applications. And this is also why NoSQL solutions, and amongst them most of all MongoDB, is super popular for read-write heavy applications, applications with a lot of workload, applications that store a lot of data, let's say smart devices, which send some sensor data every second. For such applications, but also for building an online shop or a blog, MongoDB is an amazing solution due to the performance and the flexibility it gives you. So now that I introduced MongoDB, what it is and how it roughly works, let me take a step back and go back to the MongoDB company. As I mentioned, the company behind the MongoDB database solution is also called MongoDB. And actually, they have a couple of other products too, and I will have a look at a lot of them throughout this course. So how does the MongoDB ecosystem look like? Obviously, we got the MongoDB database, which is their core asset, the core feature, and the core topic of this course, and probably the reason why you took this course. There you have a self-managed and an enterprise solution. We'll work with the community, with the free community version in this course, which has all the features we need. But of course, I will also dive into deploying that and showing you a way of getting your local database, with which we'll play around in this course, into the web and how to use it on a real app. No worries. Then they have some tools that are related to managing that database. That is more of a system admin, database admin task. I'll not cover it in this course because this is a course for you as a developer. And they have a cloud solution. That is something I will cover because this is an amazing solution for you as a developer, because all the managing a system administrator would have to do is done for you there. And you can focus on the data and your logic there. So this is awesome, and we will use that in this course too. But we'll also work locally, no worries. They also have a mobile solution, which basically means you can install MongoDB on a mobile device to store data there directly and even work without an internet connection. They got a graphical user interface, Compass, which allows you to connect to your database and look into it with a nice user interface. We will also use that in the course, but most of the time we will not, because as a developer, you of course write code. You don't click around in graphical user interfaces, and therefore we will, well, write code in this course. And we got also some other tools like BI connectors or MongoDB charts if you're more on the data science area. This is not really something where you will write a lot of code. These are more tools that allow you to connect different analytics tools if you need that. Now, this is the entire database world, and this is of course their core feature. Hence, they have a lot of products there, as you can see. Now, they also got a relatively new offering, which is called Stitch. And Stitch is basically their serverless backend solution. So this is a bit decoupled of the database, still strongly connected, but also it offers you more than just data storage. Stitch, for example, gives you a serverless query API. And you will see this towards the end of the course, where I have a whole module about Stitch and where I introduce the core products they have in that Stitch environment. So there you will see that this is essentially a tool set, a tool which you can use to efficiently query your database directly from inside your client-side apps. So from inside your React app or anything like that. But this will become clearer in the Stitch module, of course. You also have serverless functions, which allows you to execute code in the cloud on demand. So now this is totally unrelated to the database. You can execute any JavaScript code in the cloud there. And if you know something like AWS Lambda or Google Cloud Functions, this is your equivalent. We also have database triggers, which is basically a service that allows you to listen to events in a database, like a document was inserted, and then execute a function in response to that. And that function could then maybe send an email to a user informing him about that document being inserted, something like that. And there is a feature called real-time sync, which basically is built to synchronize a database in the cloud with that mobile offline supporting database you might have on mobile devices. This is the current snapshot of their ecosystem. The focus of this course is on the MongoDB database, which we'll use locally and in the cloud with Atlas, and how you can work with that, how you can use CRUD operations, how you can retrieve your data efficiently, and all of that. But I will also dive into Compass, I will also dive into the Stitch world and introduce you to that in this course. So let's take a break from the theory now and let's simply get started. Let's install MongoDB locally for now and let's connect to it and see how we can work with it. Now, MongoDB runs on all operating systems, Mac, Linux, Windows. On all three operating systems, you can go to mongodb.com and on that page click on Get MongoDB in the top right corner. That will allow you to download the MongoDB installer and install it locally on your machine. Now there, by default, it's selected this Atlas thing. That is something we'll dive into later in the course. For now, let's use the free community server. Now the enterprise server would be your paid solution. We don't want to use that. We'll use the free one, which gives us everything we need. The enterprise server just adds some enterprise level features like different kinds of authentication and encryption, which we don't need here. So let's go with the community server. And then there, choose your operating system in case it's not pre-selected correctly. Now there, you can go with the default version that is installed, and then you can click the download button. By the way, also always check these installation instructions where you find a link to here if you're facing any issues. So now I'll download that. And you don't need to sign up here. You can just wait for the download to start. And once the download finished, you can, on Mac and Linux, simply extract that file that was downloaded. On Windows, you can start the installer. Now, if you have that installer, simply walk through the different steps there and choose Custom when you have the chance for it. Now there, you can leave the defaults as they are. I just want to inform you that on Windows, MongoDB will be installed as a service, as you can see here. Now you could uncheck this, but this is fine. This is a little different to how it will then run on Mac and Linux, but you can follow along fine in both cases, and I will of course show you how to connect to it in both scenarios. So simply click Next and install it on Windows in the destination you chose. On Mac and Linux, you simply have that extracted folder here. And now you can grab all these files in that folder and copy them into any place on your operating system where you want to install MongoDB, so to say. So there, I will go to a folder I prepared and simply paste that into here. Now the bin folder is the important folder. This has all the MongoDB related executables. Most of them you'll not really need for this course, but we will work with a couple of them to start our own MongoDB server, which then hosts our MongoDB databases. We'll also use the one for importing data at some point in the course, and we will use the shell client, which is a client that allows us to connect to the MongoDB database and run commands on it. And on Windows, you get the same executables in your installation path, by the way. Now, with these files being placed in the part or in the place of your operating system where you want them, you should do something else on Mac and Linux. You should go to your root folder on your system, and there you should create a new folder named data. And in that folder, create another new folder named DB. And you can do that on Windows too if you want. You don't need to, but you should create that folder at some place in your operating system. It can be anywhere, it doesn't have to be the root folder, but it will be easier to follow along for the rest of the course if you use that. But I will also show you how to start MongoDB when you use a different folder or a different path. So create that DataDB folder, if possible, in your root folder of your MacBook, of your computer, of your laptop, or create it in any other path. I will show you how to make it work with both. Now with that, start your terminal or on Windows, your command prompt. And this is where we'll work in for the majority of this course, because there we can run all these important queries or commands to insert or to retrieve data. But of course, I will also show you how to then apply the knowledge you gain in here in a real app. I'll actually do this in this first module already. Now in there, try running Mongo, and you should get a command not found error. Now on Mac and Linux, you fix this by going into your user folder and then look for a bash profile file. If you don't have that file, you can simply create it, .bash_profile. You can then edit this with a text editor, and in there, you need to change your so-called path variable, or you need to enhance it, you need to append something to it. You do this by adding export, starting with a lowercase e, path equal, and then use the path to the folder where you placed your MongoDB binaries in. So in my case, this is in here, and you can simply right-click on that item, on that executable and copy that path here if you want. And move that path into here, starting with 1/, and in my case it's users, my username, development, MongoDB, binary, because that is the path I use to place MongoDB in. Now, important on Mac and Linux, to make sure that all your other commands work, you need to add a colon and then $path at the end, and then save your bash profile file. Now on Windows, you also need to set this, and you do this with a so-called environment variable. So simply press the Windows key and type environment, and you should be suggested this option of setting environment variables at some point. Open that, and there under your user variables, you should also choose the path variable. Edit this variable, and then add a new entry here, which is the path to the directory where you installed MongoDB, and there to the bin directory as well. So always to the directory where all these executables can be found in. Simply copy that path and add it to the path variable, and then simply save that. The same is true here for Mac and Linux. Save that edited bash profile, and thereafter close all terminal or command prompt instances. You need to restart both. Once you restarted your terminal or command prompt, you should be able to run Mongo, and it should give you an error that it can't connect. On Windows, it will connect because MongoDB is running as a service there already. So the MongoDB database server started as a background service because we checked this during the installation. So on Windows, you now probably already are connected. Now, therefore, on Windows, to also see how you could start it differently, and I will have a whole module in this course where I talk a bit more about this shell and connection thing. But on Windows, you can close that command prompt and start a new one as an administrator by right-clicking on the executable and choosing Run as Administrator. And there, you can now type net stop MongoDB written like this. And this will only work on Windows. Don't do it, don't try it on Mac or Linux. This will stop that background service. And now you can also start the MongoDB server manually, just as we do it here on Mac and Linux. You can now start your server by typing MongoD. So Mongo basically is a client which allows you to connect to the server and then run commands on your databases. MongoD starts the Mongo database server. So MongoD is now a command you can use, and when running it, it might fail. Now it might fail if you chose a different DataDB folder. I mentioned it would be easiest if you use your root directory, so the C drive on Windows, or if you use that root directory on Mac and Linux for the DataDB folder. If you use a different folder, you need to start your MongoD instance here by typing MongoDB --db path, and then the path to the place where you created your DataDB folder. If that path includes some white space in there, you need to wrap it with curly braces. So for example, here I could type DataDB. That is redundant though. That is the default where it looks for anyways. And that is the path I'm using it here in my operating system, the default as suggested. And on Windows, you can of course also add it in the same way to make sure you point at the folder where that data is stored. On Windows, actually, I need to change that because there the default path is inside of the installation folder of Mongo database. And then you start the MongoDB server like this. Now, if you type this, it should now start up. If you still get an error on Mac and Linux, simply try running sudo in front of this entire command. This will give you the right permissions to store data in that path. You are prompted to enter your password then, and then it should work. On Windows, this is not required and also not available. Now, with that, the MongoDB database server is up and running. On Windows, you don't need to do that. After restarting your system, the MongoDB service should be running in the background again, and you can absolutely use that. It's the same server, just automatically started in the background. On Mac and Linux, you have to start it manually for now. I have a whole module where I dive deeper into that and explain how to start it as a service on Mac and Linux too. So now with that up and running, open a new window, a new terminal or command prompt window, and leave the old one running. You need to leave that process running as long as you work on it, because that is your running database server. If you shut that down, you can't work with it anymore. You can always quit it by pressing Ctrl+C. This will quit and simply exit. But then you need to restart if you want to work on it again. So in that new window, you can now run Mongo, and this will automatically connect to the running server. So now you are in the Mongo shell, which is the environment where you can run commands against your database server, where you can create new databases, new collections, and most importantly, new documents. And this is now what we'll work on in the next lecture.